Welcome back, everybody. We're ready to take a deep dive today, and we're going to be looking at the mother-daughter relationship in Fourth Wing. You know the one I mean. Between Violet and General Lilith Sorrengail.
I think what's so fascinating about their dynamic is it's not your typical mother-daughter relationship. There's not a lot of warmth there, right? There's a lot of tension. You can just feel it.
Yes. There's like Lilith's always on the parade ground, even when she's at home. And we know she's this powerful figure in Navarre. I mean, she's an instructor at Basgiath War College. She's a commanding general. And she even helped capture those leaders of the Tyrrish Rebellion.
Right.
So does that military mindset carry over into how she raises Violet?
It totally does. When you look closely at how Lilith parents, it's very much informed by her military background. Love, or what looks like love, it's almost like it's transactional. Like it's tied to Violet meeting these crazy high standards.
Oh, wow.
It's less about nurturing and more about molding Violet into like a weapon, the perfect soldier.
Okay, so that's starting to sound pretty harsh. Can you give us a specific example? Something that really shows us Lilith's coldness? An example of this transactional love.
Well, just look at Violet wanting to become a scribe. Lilith just shuts her down. It's like ice. To Lilith, it's like Violet choosing something outside the military is a huge insult. Like it's rejecting everything Lilith believes in. And she makes sure Violet feels that disapproval, all that pressure to be something she's not. It's no wonder it affects Violet's self-esteem. It affects her mental health.
Yeah.
She's just stuck in this cycle of trying to get her mom to finally accept her, always living under that judgment.
It makes you wonder if Violet even had the chance to figure out who she is, like her own identity.
Yeah.
It's like she's always performing, trying to meet these standards that are just impossible.
Yeah.
What does that do to her emotionally?
Well, it's got to be an incredibly strain. I mean, she just wants her mother's love, right? To be accepted for who she is. But what she gets is this conditional approval, based on how she performs. And it's in this unforgiving environment with these high stakes.
Yeah. And then, of course, Lilith makes this ultimate sacrifice. She puts all her magic into creating those ward stones,
right.
Those powerful magical objects that protect the school.
Yeah.
Especially during stuff like the Tyrrish Rebellion and this act, heroic as it is, well, it leads to her death.
Yes.
So how does this fit into how we understand their relationship?
I think it definitely makes things a little more complicated. I mean, is it really unconditional love, or is it just another way for her to control Violet? Like, even in death, Lilith's still pulling the strings.
Oh, wow. That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
To only feel loved when you achieve.
And even though Lilith's gone, her influence is still there.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, does Violet feel like she has to live up to that sacrifice? Like, she's still being controlled, even though her mother's not physically there. And it really raises some big questions.
Yeah.
Like, can love really be unconditional if it has this price tag? If you have to meet these impossible standards? What does that do to Violet's mental well-being? I think that's something for our listeners to think about.
It's like instead of freeing Violet, Lilith's death might actually tie her even more to her mother's expectations, which just adds another layer to their already messy dynamic.
Definitely.
And I think this speaks to something we see a lot, not just in Fourth Wing, but in the real world too. How the expectations parents have for their kids, especially if they're really intense and controlling, can have a deep impact on their kids, right?
Right.
On their mental and emotional well-being, even into adulthood.
Absolutely. It can have a lasting effect. It's kind of like, even though Lilith sacrifices herself, it almost feels selfish, Like, it's this final act of control where she gets to shape Violet's destiny even after death.
That's deep. It makes you wonder, did it free Violet or trap her? Like now she's stuck with this burden of obligation and duty.
Yeah, there's really no easy answer. On the one hand, it looks like the ultimate act of love, right? But when you remember their whole relationship, the constant pressure, the emotional distance, well, it kind of looks different. It becomes less about putting Violet first and more about making sure she follows a certain path, even from the grave.
Wow. And how does all of this affect how Violet sees relationships in the future? Will she keep trying to prove herself like her mother wanted? Or will she break free? Will she define love on her own terms?
I think that's the real struggle for Violet.
Yeah.
She's internalized her mother's worldview.
Yeah.
That your worth comes from achievement, from strength, from always doing your duty.
Right.
But at the same time, she wants something real, a love that's not based on conditions, a connection that's not all about performance.
So it's like she's fighting this battle within herself.
Exactly.
Between what her mother drilled into her and what she actually wants deep down.
And I think a lot of us can relate to that, you know?
Yeah.
We all inherit stuff from our families, some good, some not so good. And we have to figure out which patterns are actually helpful and which ones are holding us back from having real connections.
It's like Fourth Wing isn't just fantasy and dragons. It's like a reflection of these struggles we all go through. It's like it's asking us to look inside, you know, to think about how our past affects our relationships today.
Absolutely. And through Violet, we see that it is possible to break free from those unhealthy patterns. It's not about erasing the past, but understanding it, you know, like how it affects us, and then making a conscious choice to move forward differently.
And speaking of choosing a different path, I want to go back to something about Lilith.
Okay.
It's how being a mother overlaps with her position of power in Navarre.
Right.
We touched on it earlier, but I think it's worth exploring more.
Definitely. It's like the lines get blurred between her public life and her private life, you know? That same commanding energy she has as a general, it kind of spills over into how she parents.
Right.
Which adds a whole other level of complexity, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's not just mother and daughter. There's also this power dynamic.
Yes.
Where Lilith holds all the cards.
Yeah.
And for a young woman who's already trying to find her voice well, that can be super intimidating.
Just imagine trying to tell someone like that about your needs, your desires, your vulnerabilities. It'd be like walking on eggshells the whole time. Always trying to figure out how she'll react, trying not to upset her. There's not much room for real connection there.
No. It's got to feel so suffocating emotionally. It makes you wonder if Violet ever felt truly seen or heard by her mother.
I think that's the core issue, right?
Yeah.
These power dynamics can really mess with communication and emotional intimacy in families.
Yeah.
It's not always as obvious as a military ranking.
Right.
But it can show up in different ways, like financial control, social status, even just the unspoken authority some parents have. It takes real guts to challenge those dynamics, to speak up for yourself, even when it feels scary. But it's so important for building healthy relationships, you know?
Yeah.
Relationships that are based on mutual respect and where everyone feels heard.
Okay, so that brings up a big question.
Yeah.
How does Violet deal with all this?
Yeah.
This whole mess of emotions and expectations and power struggles.
Exactly.
Let's shift gears and look at it from Violet's perspective.
Yeah.
What's going through her head as she tries to make sense of this relationship with her mother?
I imagine it's a lot of mixed emotions, you know? Confusion, hurt, resentment. Maybe even a little defiance.
Right.
She just wants her mother's love and approval, but it always feels like she's not good enough.
It's like she's carrying this weight.
Yeah.
The weight of her mother's legacy and those impossible standards, even though she's trying to create her own path.
And it's easy to internalize those messages, isn't it? To start believing that there's something wrong with us, that we're not worthy of love and acceptance just for being ourselves.
That can be so damaging, especially when you're young. It can make it hard to have healthy relationships, to trust your gut, to believe in yourself.
It's like that constant criticism becomes this voice in your head, always whispering doubts and insecurities, just chipping away at your self-worth.
And it takes a lot of strength and self-awareness to shut that voice up and start building a more positive self-image.
It's a journey, for sure. And a lot of times it means unlearning those negative messages and replacing them with something better, you know, something that reminds us of our own value.
And that's where therapy can be so helpful, right?
Absolutely.
It gives you that safe space to work through those wounds, to process those emotions and start being kinder to yourself.
It's about giving yourself permission to heal, to forgive yourself for the past, and to embrace who you are, even the flaws.
And it's also about realizing that you're not alone in this. There are so many people who've gone through similar things. And there's power in sharing our stories and supporting each other through this whole journey of self-discovery.
And I think that's what's so great about books. They let us connect with characters who are dealing with the same stuff. It makes you feel seen and understood.
It's like looking in a mirror, right?
Yeah.
It shows us our own struggles, but it also offers this glimmer of hope. Like there's a way out of the darkness.
And that brings us back to Fourth Wing. It's not just about dragons and battles. It's about how messy human relationships can be, the impact our families have on us, and the courage it takes to break free from those unhealthy cycles so we can build a future that feels real and fulfilling.
I think it's amazing how Fourth Wing can mix these deep personal struggles with this epic story. You have war and political stuff, and this whole world of magic and dragon riders. But at the heart of it, it's about people connecting and these complicated family relationships.
Yeah, it's that mix that makes it so interesting. You get caught up in the adventure and the battles in this amazing world, but then you're also pulled into Violet's very personal journey. It's like the struggles she's going through are like these bigger conflicts that are happening around her, you know?
Yeah.
You have the battles and the wars and the political schemes, but then you also have these battles that are happening inside the characters, like against their past, against their doubts, against all those things they believe in.
Yeah. And as we've seen with Violet, those internal battles are the hardest ones to win.
Right.
You need so much courage to face your deepest fears, your insecurities, and to make choices that might go against what everyone expects of you.
Yeah, and that's where Violet's journey really inspires you. Even though there's all this pressure to be like her mother, to follow in her footsteps, she ends up choosing her own path.
Yeah.
It shows how strong she is and how she's figuring out who she really is.
It really does. She starts to accept her vulnerabilities, the things she sees as flaws, the things that make her different.
Right.
And by doing that, she finds this strength inside herself that she never knew she had. A strength that comes from being true to herself, not from living up to her mother's expectations.
Exactly.
I think that's such an important message for anyone who's ever felt like they don't belong, like they're not good enough. It reminds us that our imperfections aren't something to be ashamed of. They're what make us special, what give us our strength.
It's about embracing those imperfections, those quirks that make us us, and that can help us live a more authentic life, a more fulfilling life, a life that's more true to who we really are.
Right.
It's about letting go of that need to please everyone else and stepping into our own power.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Fourth Wing,
Yeah.
I'm feeling really hopeful.
Oh, good.
Like even with all the craziness and challenges in life, we can find the courage to break free from those limiting beliefs. You know, those voices that tell us we're not enough. And we can create a future that's truly our own, a future that celebrates who we really are.
That's beautiful, and it really gets to the heart of what Fourth Wing is all about.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we all have the power to rewrite our stories, to decide what success and fulfillment mean for us, and to embrace the beauty of our own unique journeys.
So what about you listening? Has this deep dive made you think differently about anything? Have you found any connections to your own life, your own relationships? We'd love to hear from you.
And until next time, keep exploring those stories that move you, that challenge you, that remind you of the amazing power you have inside.